Breathe life through the soul of the drum, illuminated through the glow of the sun. Rhythm of invention.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Happy Musicians Podcast, where it's not about getting the gig, it's about enjoying the gig. I'm your host, Tanner Guss, and this is the first episode I'm putting out since the start of the COVID-19 quarantine. And I have to apologize, it took me a while to get something out to you all on here, but it just has been kind of crazy. Since the shutdown, all the gigs are gone, like across the board in the music world, and I decided to leave New Orleans and drive home to Salt Lake City to be with my family. But that was stressful even of its own. I broke down in Wyoming along the way, had to spend a night at the Little America and get my alternator fixed. Not fun, but I finally made it here safe. And since being here, my parents had just moved into a new home like right before this started. So they've been having to try to renovate their new house, and it's been a nightmare trying to get contractors worked out and stuff. So luckily for me, it means I've had steady working on the home and helping them with projects all over the place. But it's honestly kept me really busy, and I'm definitely not hurting for things to do. I know a lot of my musician friends out there have way more free time than they know what to do with, and I've been surprisingly busy a lot and haven't had the time to really put out something of value to you all until now. Before we get into this episode, I want to say thank you to everyone who listens and supports the podcast, especially those of you who take the time to leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. It's honestly the easiest way and the most effective way to help the podcast grow and reach a broader audience. And if you leave one, you have a chance to be featured on the show, like this one from WS3. That is a thumbs up emoji followed by a second line with 3 additional thumbs up emojis, and that's a pretty brave review. Thank you so much, WS3. Your support means a lot. Okay, let's get into this week's episode. This week I am joined by a friend and important mentor of mine, Wayne Wallace, who is a trombonist, producer, arranger, composer, teacher, historian, pretty much everything, and at the highest level you can imagine. His performance record includes monsters including Irakere, Los Van Van, Tito Puente, the Count Basie Orchestra, Bobby Hutcherson, Tony Williams, Stevie Wonder, Ray Charles. Like, it's endless. I can go on and on, but I won't for time's sake. Let's just say that he is the real deal. About half the conversation explores the music world and how it's been affected by COVID-19. His experience as a teacher, trying to do these Zoom calls and teach classes online, how it's forcing musicians to get more creative in how they interact with their audiences, and also, and maybe most importantly, the room for improvement that we have now as a result of this unfortunate opportunity to change the music industry. The other half of the conversation is just broadly his relationship with music and him sharing stories and his hot takes on how we can have a better relationship with music and happier lives. Normally I do the interviews over the phone because I have the most control on the audio and we have less internet issues, but I thought it would be topical to do it over Zoom, which is the platform that companies and schools and pretty much everyone is using during all this to communicate and stay connected. And let me tell you, that was a mistake. It was a complete nightmare. We had so many issues. We lost each other like 10 times. The audio is a bit distorted. But I think through all of it, we managed to get a really insightful and helpful conversation. And I appreciate you taking the time and energy to listen to it now. So I hope you enjoy. Thanks for being here. And please help me welcome Wayne Wallace. One thing I'm really curious is just getting your take on all of this, because for me and my age, this is kind of in my opinion, the first big world event where I'm old enough to understand the ramifications of it and try to process it. And there's a lot of talk in the news and all that about how this is kind of an end times deal. And I guess someone who's been through growing up in the 60s and the 70s and been through it all, how do you process all of this?
It seems like I'm kind of an amateur history buff. Mm-hmm. Whenever Smithsonian Channel comes on and talks about different things, I always watch it because I want to learn. And there was one segment called "The Story of," that talks about the human race through the cell of the Hun, the bubonic plague, all the things that happened. And I had already seen the segment on the 1918 flu,
Mm-hmm.
and I ended up on the internet and doing some studying of my own about a year ago. And no big deal. I mean, the internet, everything's there. All that information's there. We're making the same mistakes, almost verbatim, that Woodrow Wilson made back in 1918 after World War I.
And those in particular being?
Denying that it was dangerous.
Right.
Not wanting to call it something that was a pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
The only reason Spanish flu, Spain was the only country that said we have a problem here. And that's why it got called the Spanish flu. It started in the United States in Kansas.
Mm. Oh, okay. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's all there. We took it to Europe during World War I. There was a small community in Kansas, and it got caught. There was like a swine flu of some sort, something like that. And it was a small 100, 200 people. But several of these people, men, got enlisted into the army, and they took it to the training base in Georgia. Infected all those people. They went up east, deployed to Europe, gave it to them, took it to Europe, took it to, gave it to all the soldiers there and to Europeans. Then that went east. They came back with it and brought a second wave of it to Philadelphia.
Hmm.
There were three waves of the so-called Spanish flu.
Okay.
And they didn't do distancing. The only cities that, as I've read it, that did social distancing back in 1918, 19 was St. Louis and San Francisco.
Hmm. Okay.
In fact, the mayor of Philadelphia said, I don't care. And they held this big parade, and in a week, there were like 2,500 people infected.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, it does sound familiar, doesn't it?
Yeah. Exactly. Oh, that's so frustrating. Well, and then there was the more recent swine flu in 2009.
Yeah, and that was handled better.
Right.
The CDC did a much better job on that. You can go back to SARS before that. That's the avian flu, the bird flu.
Mm-hmm.
That came out of Asia also. As I grew up, measles, chicken pox, things like that. But nothing, the last, I'd say 30 years, there's nothing, it's been severe like the bubonic plague or something like that, which worldwide.
Right. Well, and I guess the crazy thing to me about this is like the whole country, unless you're in an essential field, is kind of on lockdown. I guess to a certain extent, it's not martial law or anything, but there's no work. Like there's for me
that it's strong medicine. It's very strong medicine. If let's say 98% of the country, which they're kind of doing now, is following the rules, and the other 2% doesn't, it'll flare right back up.
Yeah.
That's what they found in 1918. That's why they had the second and third wave.
Right. Well, and I'm all for the measures that are being taken, cutting off all these men. It's just crazy to me. I'm curious. I guess has there ever been something like this where just the whole music industry comes to a standstill like this before?
Not to a standstill, but getting scared. From my lifetime was the AIDS epidemic.
Yeah, okay.
Because know how it was being contracted. They called it a gay. Ronald Reagan for 5 years would never mention the word AIDS.
He used what term?
So people, wouldn't even acknowledge it.
Okay.
Not that it could be passed with heterosexual people.
Mm-hmm.
It was always labeled as a gay disease.
Right.
But it's that same thing of government. Woodrow Wilson didn't
Welcome back to the Happy Musicians Podcast.
That's the second time that's happened to me today.
I believe it. This must be a huge pain to deal with trying to do lectures.
It's an unbelievable pain. But that's what we got. It's better than nothing.
That's true.
But to your point.
Did I lose him immediately again? That's just not fair. That's just not fair.
Back again.
We're back.
Your latency got really weird. It was like a ring modulator.
Yeah, Zoom's getting psychedelic on us.
Well, I think about that Zoom bombing thing too, where people just come in and disrupt meetings. So that's possible also.
Yeah. Well, and I've heard some classes, they kept kicking out the professor over and over again in the lecture, and just things like that. I'm sure. Well, and even there's like the chat option. So I hopped on like one of the IU hangs earlier last week, and I was just messaging some of my friends that were in there and stuff. But I'm sure there's all kinds of. It would be so hard to keep someone's attention because they could also just be like searching online at the same time.
Exactly. It's the wild, wild west.
How have you gone about, like, so for instance, big band, Latin jazz ensemble? What are you doing in lieu of those rehearsals right now?
I gave everybody, Joe and I both came up with the idea of giving everybody assignments on their instruments to study and type solos, like from Afro-Cuban musicians and or Brazilian musicians, to understand the style, the history, and the trajectory of the music. Because I know there's technical things you can do. People are trying that, but I can't see, because of their inner relationship and the call and response within the Latin rhythm section, piecing all that together.
Right. Yeah, I'm doing a collaborative video project right now, and I started with a drum group, and then everyone's composed their own thing on top of it. I had a bunch of people involved, and it's been really cool, but it's just a completely different experience. I definitely don't feel like it supplements the conversation aspect of this. It's just its own thing.
Yes, that's kind of how I'm looking at it. I don't think it's good or bad. It's just different. And Joe came up with a great saying that this is not what the students signed up for.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, you're right. So we're going to have to make everyone is going to have to make some type of major adjustment, because they say it's possible that this might last 2 years. It's going to go away, come back. So we got to figure out a long-term fix on it. Mm-hmm. My suggestion, and it kind of works two ways. One, I have an invitation to work with a vocalist that I did a recording with to play the Monterey Jazz Festival in September.
Right.
So the thought is that the warm weather will keep the virus, right? I think we possibly may have, if we're careful and do the social distancing, have a 4 to 6 month window every year to perform and record.
Oh, so just like during the summers?
Possibly. Thought, which I don't know if it can happen, school can maybe go August into November. So you would have to compact all the classes and performances. Otherwise, people are not getting their money's worth. The biggest thing here is people are not getting able to do their recitals. They can't graduate on time. So we're going to have to adjust in some way. That was my first thought, was just to condense everything.
Yeah. Well, I guess, like New Orleans is getting hit so hard right now. And I left there like a week and a half ago or something.
Yeah.
And it was in the upper 70s. Like, it was getting real nice and warm, and maybe it just hasn't gotten hot enough yet to have an effect. Like,
well, the other thing too is I don't know if we know enough about this virus.
Oh, we definitely don't.
I still think we're in the infant stages of seeing what it does, because the big lie was that it didn't affect puberty. Now all of a sudden they found out infants are dying. And actually they found was that the lions at the New York Zoo, animals are catching it. So it's zoonotic
Usually just cats or something.
Yeah, going all the way, it's zoonotic going, if it came from bats to us, maybe the bats are giving it to the lions, or we're giving it to the lions, who knows? There's a lot to be figured out about this.
Well,
more to your question, though. What are we going to do going forward as musicians?
Right.
We have to figure out some way to play together. If it's just jazz, if you're doing parts and you can just mail in your parts and it's written out, it's almost like classical music. You have a score and everybody just plays what the composer has written. You can fudge and maybe ask for a little bit of improvisation, or give me 5 different takes of this and I'll sit and mess with it until I get it so it sounds like we're improvising together.
Right.
But it's kind of the antithesis of the whole concept.
Yeah, I guess you could kind of people are doing these live busking sessions, you know? You get together and you're standing 6 feet apart in an area and you're playing, which I feel like is mostly just relief for you as a performer. You get a chance to finally play with other people, and that's awesome, and it preserves the essence of the music. But I guess I haven't tried it yet, and I haven't really asked people who are doing it. But I just can't imagine that people are making much money doing that, because I see these and I'm like, that's really cool, and I'll watch like a song or something. I'm like, this just isn't the same, like not being there. And I'm not gonna your attention span on social media sites where people are all competing for these sessions is so small that I just don't think that the busking model in its own, even on the street, is like you're just giving away music right there, hoping that people will feel grateful enough to pay you. Doing it virtually is even harder.
Yeah, the only people that can kind of get away with it is to have an independent studio and be very careful about who you let into your studio.
Right. I guess that would be what I would say, is that you could turn it into, like, you buy tickets for the event and then you get access to the stream, you know? And that would be one way to, I think that's the smarter way to do it.
Yeah.
And that also kind of just plays into things I've been thinking about with the growth of virtual reality. You know, you could have more and more concert experiences like that. And I wonder if there are experiments being done right now of how you could incorporate that into musical performances for festivals and things, if this continues on longer than we'd like.
Yeah. Our old model, the whole idea of a festival is there's a whole bunch of people there. It creates a unique, or club, you don't even have to go that far. Club creates a unique energy. It goes back and forth between the performers and the audience. The audience, people who love the music, are all there for the same reason. It ends up getting totally dispersed. I don't know there's very little done about it under these circumstances. The best hope is for a vaccine.
Yeah. I guess, I almost feel like hopefully we can get through this. It seems kind of weird to me to try to create some kind of system. I guess you have to do something for people to try to make some money, but it's almost like I'd rather people spend their time making and writing new great music, and then when we get through this, there can be a proliferation of all this great new art.
I like that.
And hopefully that, I guess in my mind, the system itself wasn't really working, or it was kind of running on fumes before this happened, you know?
I agree. I totally agree.
And do you think there's things that we could do as a community and as a society, maybe specifically here in the United States, to improve the system coming out of this?
Well, what we've seen, this might be weird, where did that $2 trillion come from that supposedly we didn't have?
Right. Yeah.
Couldn't that have gone to the arts or gone to the healthcare system? And now they're talking about more money, but Congress has been saying we don't have any money. Suddenly it go up to like I guess it's going to be $4 trillion. So what do? Money and the debt ceiling goes up, and why not? If we're going to be in debt, why don't we make people healthy and make them happy and just be in debt?
Yeah, that's very true. I guess I see it as, it seems like the system is set up to get working class people indebted, and then they're just playing the game, providing resources for the system, trying to pay off that debt, you know?
That's how capitalism works. The fundamental tenet of, to me, as I've looked at it through history, is that capitalism needs cheap labor force. That could be African Americans, that could be Chinese, that could be Mexican, take your pick. At one point, it was the Irish, like right before conscription, before the Civil War. We've always had that here. So, and the fight has been up and through the 20th century, finally getting Social Security. That would be FDR. And what happened with the unions, the struggle against unions going forward, it's been interesting. There's always been this push and pull. And I don't want to talk about Democratic or Republican, but in our society, in capitalism, there's always been that pull. Pull. This Bernie Sanders, in some respects, was right. So if the rest of the world can have a free medical system or better health, we should be able to do it, however we fight it out. First time I went to Cuba, I went with a group. It was about 30 of us. A woman from Canada was doing a dance class and she cut her foot. Now, she was Canadian. They took her to a hospital, fixed her foot, and didn't charge her a cent. Their healthcare system was that intact. Now, that's socialism. So somewhere in the middle, because that's what they say, Sweden, Denmark, there's socialistic countries in that way. Yeah. We have the stigma of socialism from the Cold War.
Right.
People hear that. What I heard was cool. Generation doesn't have that stigma like the baby boomers do. And that they think, yes, there should be health care for everybody. Yes, education shouldn't be as expensive as it is. Government should pay for part of it, which was what happened in Cuba. So I think it's going to change. I don't think it's going to stay like this. We have these people are stuck still back in the Cold War and they can't move forward.
For sure. Well, and I think talking about it, at least to me, it does feel like there is a lot of political activism, although a lot of it is weirdly based on social media, which has its own effect. But I mean, you growing up in the 60s in the civil rights movement, and then it's like, and everything going on with the women's rights movement in the 70s and all that. Yeah, right. Does it feel like a resurgence of that energy to you?
It starts and stops in spurts. The 60s and even the 50s with the civil rights movement was boots on the ground every day.
Okay.
It wasn't like, hey, we're talking about it. We're talking about, no, we're doing something. So there was some serious doing between the Black Panthers, Cesar Chavez, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, take your pick all the way through, the gay rights movement. There were people physically out there doing stuff and not just talking about it on Twitter or Instagram or whatever particular platform that people were using now. It was really face to face. That's what caused so much trouble. The 1969, 68, I forget which.
Countless layers of rhythm piled one on top of the other. Drummers intersecting each other at places that are not normally thought of places where you can join the the music. Music transcends these delimiting definitions, and he played music. A multiplicity of things. It's a lot of things to a lot of different people. Perhaps the only means of expression for an oppressed people. What we define as jazz music started probably around 1910. West African heritage, democratization of values. And in that kind of thinking, every beat has as much importance as every other beat.
Welcome back to the Happy Musicians Podcast.
We might be at that point. Everybody's probably using the internet at the same time.
Okay, yeah.
Because nobody has anything to do.
Uh-huh.
We might, I think not us, but in general, the population is oversaturating the internet.
Well,
Go ahead.
yeah, I just think it's going to be really funny to have this bit of history as like, this is how people were trying to communicate right now. Like, this is what our lives were during the social isolation period.
This is your 9/11.
Mm.
Yeah, you guys don't have to experience that because we had never seen anything like that. For my mom, it was her Pearl Harbor. Those type of things. This is your 9/11.
For sure. Yeah, it's definitely hard to deal with, and it's kind of a day-by-day thing for all of us. It's almost, I don't know, it's kind of easier to deal with having no bearing for how crazy it is. I feel like if we had a better understanding of how insane this was, it would be even scarier.
I think so. If we get cut off again, we can just keep talking or connect again. I find the biggest thing, you struggle to keep structure.
Yeah.
I don't know if I even care what day it is. I just need to get up the next day and do stuff, look at my calendar. And we kind of have the structure of classes, but because there's no need to rush off and go to class and get in your car and worry about stuff like that, it just changes your whole idea of what life is like.
Mm-hmm. I ran into a friend at the grocery store randomly, and I was overjoyed. I was like almost emotional. I was so excited to see this person. And it was just like, man, this like normally would just kind of be a funny thing that we saw each other, but this feels like a big moment. It
is. Well, you know what? If there's a silver lining to this, we appreciate the little things more. And that could be just noticed, like you just said, seeing a friend and going, I have a friendship more than I ever had before because I don't know what's going to happen. Walking down the street and going, I never noticed that tree before. Those kind of things happen now because we don't have those other trappings or the daily take you away from being in the world things.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes, that in that respect, it's kind of good.
Yeah.
It's too bad it takes something like this to take us to that spot, but I'll take stuff that happens.
Mm-hmm. I feel that. When I kind of want to go back to, I do really want to try to pin down some things that you think, if we think the music community can come out of this strong with, some takeaways be good for us. And one thing that I feel strongly about is, I think in general, in like the academia version of improvised Black American music, since you spend so much time in the practice room thinking about licks and material and like the theoretical structure of the language, you become so inside yourself, and like all you can think about is this mechanical expression of those ideas instead. And it's also a result of you only have a few classes where you're actually just playing a lot, and there aren't a ton of gigs to go around. And so you start to think about music as this isolated expression of self. And now I'm learning in New Orleans, playing in a music community more and more, playing a lot of gigs, of like, I have so much more fun and I enjoy it and I connect with it when I don't think about myself and I think about the band as a whole. And hopefully, I guess this could go two ways. On one hand, you're going to have a ton of that time alone just thinking about your playing, which could maybe fuel the problem. But you could also have it where, since we're all isolated from each other, not by choice, not by a practice room, by just because we can't see each other, maybe when we get back together and play again, there will be a newfound appreciation for what everyone else is doing in the band.
I totally agree. I always tell my trombone students, because I've marveled at how you guys at IU, if you're taking 16, 20 units when you have time to eat and sleep, let alone play music together.
Yeah.
John Coltrane's at one point was to get up in the morning, eat breakfast, play long tones for an hour, play scales for 2 hours, eat lunch, come back, work on tunes, take a nap, go to the gig. That was his routine. So so right now, outside of going to the gig, we have no excuse for not working on our skills. We have all the time in the world to pull that part of it together. Jazz academia is good, double-edged sword, because you learn, but you're not actually getting the visceral part of it on stage, like a Blakey or a Wayne Shorter, or any of those people who grew up in those bands and they had to play 5 nights a week. You had to memorize the tunes. Blakey would say, "You're hired." I remember, I think it was Winter Branford. They had to learn the set that day. They had to learn the tunes because they weren't written down.
Right.
The Ellington band, a lot of those charts, they'd taken the basic sheets and just developed the arrangements.
Yeah, I've listened to a lot of Ellington during this, and some of them he even says when he's talking. Well, it's funny to listen to some of those live recordings and hear them as like, oh yeah, they're just doing a couple sets at a club. Like, I understand the atmosphere now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is a jam session for all intents and purposes, and it's cool to hear them developing the music like that. But you're right.
Ellington eventually would take a fixed arrangement into the studio, but he used the band like a laboratory. I can say the same thing. I'm doing that contemporary jazz and soul class. Sly Stone did the same thing for 3 years before he got to the Stand album. They were in the studio all the time.
And so, do you think academia could better capture that essence of the music, or is that kind of emotional and maybe spiritual thing too hard to get across with the red tape that comes from university?
They're two totally different animals. I think it's not impossible, but it's improbable that you can get the same feeling playing live. There's nothing that matches you having to get up and sit in after Brian Blade has played. You're in the club and everybody's looking at you after Brian Blade has played, or Brian Blade's going to play after you. Nothing makes you a better player than that type of, I don't even want to say competition or pressure, just whatever it is.
Yeah. I guess for me, it's like you've just in the moment been given a concrete example of the thing that you want to do. And now you don't have time to overanalyze it or lose touch with it. Like, you can go up there and you have the same instrument, the same atmosphere, same audience. Like, the only difference is just your relationship with it in that moment,
Right. Very good. I agree with that. And that's just how you get better. That's part of the growth process, is to be in that culture, in that. Actually, I think I told you that Coltrane story about that. Real good one. Coltrane, 65, 66 before his death, was having this jam session, like a weekly jam session. and like Pharoah Sanders, Archie Shepp, all of them would hang out,
Mm.
and everybody would play. And I don't know which saxophonist it was. So train finishes, and this young 16, 17-year-old saxophonist wants to sit in. And Train graciously says, sure, go on up. And he's not a mature musician. He plays his best, but it's not mature at all. And Train just sits there. Some saxophone player walks up to Train and says, why are you letting him sit in? He can't play. And Train says to the other saxophonist, who am I to judge where people are at in their maturation process?
Mm.
The kid finishes playing. Train thanks him, gets up and starts playing his solo note for note. And the other saxophonist goes, I'm not worthy, I'm not worthy, I'm not worthy.
Wow.
You know, where you're at is where you're at.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm sure that young saxophonist is a better player after sitting in with that rhythm section.
Yeah.
So if that's available to you in college or any part of jazz academia, that's the closest thing I can think of. It's like if you guys can play with the faculty on a consistent level once a week, you'd be better players.
Okay, yeah, I guess that was going to be my first suggestion. And there used to be, I don't know if they've reinstituted it or not, there was a class like that at IU, at least for the rhythm section player. There was a rhythm section master class where the faculty would interchange with everyone, and it was all in the room, and it was just all playing for 2 hours straight. And that was fantastic, but it's almost like there are jam sessions that are hosted, and those are cool. But if there was just a class that was like, this class is a jam session, like it's just here every week, and the faculty are there playing, could be really impactful at any university.
The only problem, just to play contrarian with that,
Of course,
is a jam session, not a cutting session. It's in a professional atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
And there are people there who don't know you, and they're not going to patronize. And that's where you get better, because you know you have to go that next level to impress or bring those people over to your side. Your teachers, your friends are not going to say anything.
That's a good point.
That's the only thing. And it's not like anybody needs to be mean. I've always said that if an older musician doesn't like you, they won't say anything about your playing.
Mm.
But if they like you, they'll say, you might want to try doing this because they see you have potential to do something.
Okay.
At least that's what I grew up with.
They'll
just ignore you if they don't think you're serious about it. The old school guys just go, whatever.
Mm. Yeah, that's a helpful way to look at receiving criticism. Like it's like they're taking the time to give you information. I guess sometimes I feel like you do get information from people who are eager to give it, and you didn't ask for it in the first place. And a lot of times I feel like those people who are giving out unsolicited criticism are not the people you should be taking advice from.
So the difference between criticism and a critique,
okay,
is perspective. If Brian Blake says, I'm looking at you doing a match grip on the sticks, but when you play this particular lick, you might want to try it this way. He doesn't have to do that.
Yeah.
I would listen and try it. And if it didn't work for me, I would just say, thank you, I'm going to try it, and just figure out what works for you.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, and like he's like my drummer hero right now. If you told me anything, I would definitely tattoo it on my arm. But I have a couple other things that I'm interested in getting your perspective on. And maybe one is that, do you have a different perspective on, I guess, downtime or having this much time alone with your instrument and you don't have a practical way to apply it, in a setting, maybe as a result of injuries that you've had in the past that have kept you off of the horn, So this is a situation that a lot of people are in that you are very familiar with.
Yeah, I'm rehabilitating after my cancer surgery and all of that. it's kind of a blessing. I sit and play long tones. I practice every day. I have a concept. It's just a matter of being able to execute it and put myself in that situation. It's kind of an unfortunate blessing, but I got the time to work on it. No excuses.
Yeah. And do you think, I keep going back and forth on, there's almost like a stigma right now that you have to be hyper productive during this time, you know? And there are plenty of people who are just so stressed out that even getting through the day is like an achievement.
That's an American sensibility. You can look at Europe, the whole thing of this in Spain, of the siesta, where everything stops for 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
We are driven here. If you're not doing something, you're not efficient in the United States. Not everybody thinks like that. I think the creative musician is stimulated by just thinking sometimes and just having an open space to let things flow in and not be constrained by, I have to create every second. I mean, it's as simple as taking a walk. One of the best things I like to do is just pull weeds in my backyard. And I pull them very, very slowly. I'm not like, I got to get the weeds in. Let's go. And some of my better musical ideas come when I'm not thinking about music.
Yeah, definitely. We kind of started talking about how you're a bit of a historian. And I wanted to get into that particularly because I feel like only recently have I come to appreciate history and want to understand it and want to be a part of it. And in school, it was just this mob of information that I didn't understand the value that it had or what effect it had on me. And now I feel very connected to it in a sense of like wanting to be a part of that lineage and to experience the ancestors of the music in the moment by becoming intimately aware of their lives and what they went through and what they sounded like. And I guess I'm a believer that you can't receive information that you're not ready for, that you don't want, you know?
That's right.
So how do you go about instilling an interest for history and an understanding of the value of it in students so that they can get the most out of the information you're trying to give to them?
I think you already said it. You can only deal with it when a person can only deal with that information in his or her own time. Mm-hmm. What's that thing in Avatar where he first goes to the tribe and he says, I want to learn. And the wise woman says, it's very difficult to put something into a vessel that's already full.
Okay, I like that a lot.
Oh, yeah, that's an old thing, I think. If you have to come to that, if you want to learn, you have to come as an empty vessel so all the information can be put into you.
Right. Well, and in music school, like you're always a full vessel. You're always overflowing with information that hasn't soaked in yet.
So I don't think a 4-year college, how long did it take Charlie Parker to learn his, he helped, I think it was like 8 years, something like that. Academic, good. It's structured, but not everybody learns the same way, which I'm really cool with that. Some people are oral, some people are visual, all of that. But you might not be able to focus in the way. What was it, Dizzy Gillespie? I'll pick another one. When he was working with Cab Calloway's band, he and Oscar Pettiford they'd 6 sets a night, something like that. They'd play a set, be in a hotel or a club. They'd go to another room and jam and start working on bebop ideas. Go back, and they kept doing that till the gig was over. Go out, 42nd Street, 52nd Street, get something to eat, listen to somebody else play, and then jam with them. Go home, get up and practice. That was their life.
Yeah. I guess.
And we're closer to that right now, except for the playing part.
Right.
Hi again.
Welcome back to the show. Um,
Rufus interrupt us.
All right. Okay. So, right along with what you were just saying, there are like two common sentiments that people get throw around a lot right now that I want to run by your perspective. And one of them is that, like, it's almost harder to be productive, or even not necessarily that. Like, I find it hard to promote music and impress upon people the value of it and get an audience attention right now, because there are so many easily accessible collections of art and entertainment that are very cheap and affordable for anyone. Netflix, YouTube.
This is true.
And so would you agree that it's becoming harder and harder just to get an audience's attention?
Yes.
Okay. And I almost feel like even just like at the gig, like you even get them in the room and people won't even get off their phones to even listen to you. Or they're already thinking about all the other things that they saw on Yelp that they can go check out. And this new amount of information has just caused this constant anxiety about being aware that I guess it's called the fear of missing out. There might be a better gig down the road. And it's so, I guess it's very frustrating. And like, that didn't used to be the case, did it?
You're sounding like an old guy now.
I know. I've had too many conversations with elders.
You're sounding like an old guy. So best story for that is Dizzy Gillespie. He told this story. If he wanted to hang out one, say he wanted to find Charlie Parker, you know what he did? He sat in front of his apartment. That was the only way he could get him.
Yeah.
Didn't have him. If you called the phone and he wasn't there, a message service, that's how you hooked up with someone.
Wow.
So think about that in comparison to now. If you text somebody and they don't text back in 5 seconds, you think they don't like you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's how much it has changed. I can't compare the two.
So with that in mind, then how is like a producer, when someone comes to you with some semblance of an idea and they want to put it out in the world, how do you frame it to them of what their version of success or what their expectation should be for that experience?
That's really interesting from the standpoint that expectations are all over the place now. There's an instant gratification thing, like we were just saying.
Mm-hmm.
I think you have to be, as a producer, you have to be very clear from the beginning about what the parameter, what can happen, and the probability. Some fantastic things can happen. I won't say they can't. There's one group I produced that had a hit record at the very beginning, and they weren't ready for it. They didn't have enough money to keep making more copies of the record. They had a flat out hit record, and they just got totally overwhelmed by it.
Dang.
Then you have other people who put their heart and soul into it, and the record doesn't do as well.
Yeah.
So I just talk, here's all the possibilities of what can happen. And if we're lucky, we break even. Oh my God, we made some money. Look at that.
Yeah. Spyro always talked about how each record, the only goal is to make enough money to pay for the next one.
That's right. I totally agree. If you're doing that, because of the type of music and the genre.
Right. Okay.
This is not background music. I have a running joke. It's frontground music. It demands your attention.
Right.
Smooth jazz or whatever genre you can think of as background music, you can put it in the back and people can talk over it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Jazz is very demanding.
Right. And I have a hard time impressing that on people sometimes. And I think you'll have a perspective on this from a lot of different angles, from the way that music is experienced in Cuba and Latin America, and how it's different from the US. And to help people in my life understand that this music isn't made for the same reason that like a Katy Perry song was made, you know?
Exactly.
You have to approach it differently, but you could get so much out of it. You could get something different out of it. And it's more about just being open to the experience and seeing like how you can experience the music instead of demanding how you want to experience the music.
I think one of the problems or one of the difficulties of jazz, people can look at, if you're a 13, 14-year-old girl or a young man, you can look at a John Legend, you can look at a Katy Perry and go, I can do that.
Mm.
You hear a great jazz musician or improviser and you go, oh, that's really hard. It really becomes that type of a thing. So it's a matter of, some people accept that challenge. They want that level of difficulty. I understand that. But for some people, it's a matter of accessibility. I always go back to in the 60s, we had the program in San Francisco where they brought instruments to the schools and we were encouraged to play instruments.
Yeah.
And as it went into the 80s, that went away. When I moved out to the Midwest to teach here, I was thrilled to see that churches, schools, bands, there was so much more music instruction where that was being encouraged. Art needs to be nurtured, and it has to start at a young age. If you're 12 years old and you see, oh, I need to practice.
Mm-hmm.
But when you see like whoever may be Bruno Mars, I know he worked on his craft, but it doesn't look like he's done something where it's like he had to put a lot of work into it from the technical side. Because you have synthesizers, you got the moves, you got the clothes. He's a good songwriter. I take nothing away from him. But that's kind of the environment we're in, where do you want a really good meal or do you want to go to Wendy's? Wendy's has even had to up their game for nutrition. So we're kind of caught between those two things. I think, as opposed to complaining about solution, I think every preschool child to be handed an instrument to bang or play on, not to become proficient, but just to appreciate what it takes to play a real instrument.
Yes, exactly. That's what I was thinking. And it would give the general population, which I guess this always used to be the case before you had recording technology, because if people wanted to hear music, you had a live band there playing it, or you had to have someone in the family learn to play it on the piano, you know? And now there's like this alienation of musicians because it's almost like this exotic thing that people aren't used to. And it gets, you kind of get, I feel like this as a performer, sometimes you get put up on a pedestal. And because of that, there's like this disconnect with the audience. And if people were just more comfortable and aware of what it's like to make music, improvised music like jazz music could be more accessible. And I almost wonder if you feel like that's in places like Cuba where people grow up exposed and they play that music. Is there a different connection?
Totally different. Totally different. They revere musicians. They revere live music. There is a connection between the dancers and the people, even at the jazz concerts. They're sitting there, they have got their eyes glued on. My experiences when I was in Cuba when playing, there'd be these 15 trombone players just staring me down.
Yeah.
It was a beautiful thing.
And do you think that that's kind of the key element that we could work to recreate here, is that people grow up exposed to it and they have at least a basic understanding of it, and therefore they garner an appreciation for it? Welcome back to the Happy Musicians Podcast.
Rounded. Yeah, that's a tough question. Jazz is appreciated more around the world than it is here in the United States.
And why do you think that is?
Because it's not easy to do. We take it for granted here that everyone can play the blues and play jazz. It's such a different type of style of music that's so cultural in the United States. When we hear Afro-Cuban music, we know it only can come from Cuba.
Mm.
So we put it in its own place.
Yeah.
You go to England, I mean, from Louisville now, there are people who are just going like, I need to play jazz. That is the ultimate thing I can do musically. That's how they look at it.
Mm.
It's hard. Any type of improvised music is extremely difficult because it's got to be executed technically and conceptually at the same time.
Yeah, it's almost like you're trying to create the continuity that comes from a composition, but spontaneously, and there's a certain amount of artistry and pride in the ability to do that.
And it's a lot. And
like
it's a study. And it's a study that's like it's a 24/7 study. You don't turn it off.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's hard for some people to have that type of attention. I know how difficult that's got to be. The first time I met Bobby McFerrin, he was just a fountain of information all the time.
Hmm.
He was creative all the time. My first year at the Grammys, he was one of the announcers when I was nominated. And I was backstage. And I'd known Bobby because we used to go to the same cafe, like back in San Francisco. I'd see him with his family and stuff with that. Never did a gig with him, but just, hung out every once in a while. And he went out to announce me, and I couldn't come out till he announced me. And I came out, did my thing. When I finally went to the audience, my manager said, Bobby improvised a whole introduction for you with words and songs talking about how he met you. You don't just do that kind of stuff. You're always on.
That's not the most graceful of endings, but that does do it for this week's episode of the Happy Musicians podcast. The feature track we've been listening to is off of Wayne's most recent release with his Latin jazz quintet. It's The Rhythm of Invention. This is the title track, and I seriously love this album. It's incredible. It's one of the CDs I have in my car, and it's gotten a lot of playtime for sure. I encourage you to go check it out. You can find links to it and everything else that we mentioned on the show at our website, thehappymusicians.com. There you can find archives for each episode that include links to what we talk about and actionable advice that they share. You can also find us on social media at The Happy Musicians. You can use our hashtag Happy Musician on posts you have where you're just enjoying your life as a musician. Videos of you playing, photos of you from your show, pictures from cool gigs where you say, this is the office for tonight. That's where you use the hashtag Happy Musician. Okay, thanks for being here. We really appreciate you taking the time and energy and attention out of your day to pursue a happier life as a musician. I hope it's going well. Let me know, and we'll see you next week. Thanks. Stay happy.
The highs, the lows, rhythm trapped inside the flows. Slaves to the rhythm, it's mind control. Boom clacks all rolled in one. Stay connected through the soul of the drum. Breathe life through the soul of the drum. Illuminated through the glow of the sun. Rhythm of invention. Rhythm of invention.